Hello everyone, I hope that this video finds you in good health. So today we are back with another exciting book summary. The name of this book is Why Nations Fail: The Origin of Power, Prosperity and Poverty. It is a very comprehensive book written by two authors, Daron Acemoglu and James A. Robinson. One is the Turkish-born American economist and the other is British economist and political scientist. These authors claim that they have written this book after a comprehensive research of 15 years. That is why this book is full of content. Everyone want to read this book and want to quote different research based analysis from these books. That is why we have made a summary of this book. But this book is extremely long, like it consists of 15 chapters, so we decided to break the video in different chapters. So we have decided that we will give you the summary of this book in every video you will find the summary of 2 chapters, because this is not the review of the book, this is the summary of the book. So when you will hear this summary, you will be able to understand this book thoroughly. So you will find the summary of the first chapter in this video, and in the next videos you will find the summary of 2 chapters in each video. But if you don't have this much time and if you don't want to put this much time, then there is another offer for you. That is, we have a brief summary in which is like about 20 to 30 minutes, and we will discuss all the chapters with their sections. It will not be as detailed as the videos that I have mentioned before, but it will give you a comprehensive idea of the book. Both videos will be beneficial for you. So let's start with our chapter number 1 and a basic introduction of this book. As you can see that I have told you that this book is a synthesis of many years of research. So basically it tells you about the economic growth in different countries, in different eras, and under different institutions. The main core and the finest word that can summarize this book are the institutions. They basically talked about how different institutions shape the destiny of different nations. So first of all, we will discuss the table of contents of this book. As you can see, there are 15 chapters. So in each slide you can see the 5 chapters, so close and yet so different. Then there is theories that don't work, the making of prosperity and poverty. Then chapter number 4 is about small differences and critical junctures, the weight of history. Chapter number 5 is about I have seen the future and it works. It is about growth under extractive institutions. Then there is drifting apart, the turning point, not on our turf, barriers to development, reversing development, the diffusion of prosperity. Chapter number 11 is about the virtuous cycle. Chapter number 12 is about the vicious cycle. Chapter number 13 is about why nations fail today. Chapter number 14 is about breaking the mold, and chapter number 15 is about understanding prosperity and poverty. So basically these are the table of contents of this book. So we'll start with chapter number 1, which is about so close and yet so different. Following are the 5 main sections of chapter number 1. In section number 1, we'll discuss the economics of the Rio Grande, the founding of Buenos Aires, from Cajamarca to Jamestown, and a tale of 2 constitutions. So let's move on to our section number 1, which is the economics of the Rio Grande. This is basically about the 2 cities. In this section, Acemoglu and Robinson describes the city of Nogales, which is basically divided by the US and the Mexico border. In Nogales, Arizona, most residents have at least a high school education, but on the other side, like in Sonora, there is no such thing. So basically they want to say that the 2 halves of the Nogales share the same geography, climate, history and culture. The only difference is their economic and political institutions. On the US side, residents benefits from higher wages, but on the Mexico side, institutions don't encourage investment or effective government, and that is why they have so much differences. So in this section they basically tell you all these things. The next section is the founding of Buenos Aires. In this section, the authors discussed how the Spanish claimed that Rio de la Plata estuary in South America, and in 1534 they founded the city of Buenos Aires on its bank. Then the Spanish tried and failed to enslave the local people living there, but the Spanish failed in doing so. So they just abandoned Buenos Aires because they couldn't slave the people there. And in this section, the author mainly want to synthesize an argument that how the Spanish settlers didn't want to farm the land themselves. They just wanted the slave there, and that is why they wanted to just plunder Americas. In the next section, which is from Cajamarca, the author gave another argument which is also about the Spanish conquerors. Like the Spanish conquered most of the Americas in 1500s, and their strategies were extremely ruthless. They just set up a new aristocracy. They just started taxing the people there, and they started enslaving the indigenous population. Even it has been recorded that the priests of living there in Americas, they famously spoke out against the encomienda system, which is started by the Spanish settlers, and they wrote how Spanish settlers stole their slaves, meagered their resources, and brutally tortured indigenous leaders. So in both of these sections, the author claimed about the Spanish brutality, how they colonized the land. In this section, the author also claimed that in Peru, the Spanish government also imposed other laws to extract as much wealth as possible. In the next section, which is to Jamestown, and the author discussed how England was much less powerful than the Spain in 1500s. England is also well known for its colonization, but in 1500 Spain was even more powerful. So in this section, the author told that the English settlers who founded Jamestown in 1607 planned to capture a local leader and rule over indigenous people just like the Spanish had done. But the surrounding indigenous group were organized there, and they were known as Powhatan Confederacy, and the colonists couldn't do what they wanted to do, so they just abandoned the land. So the former mercenary and criminal who was named as John Smith, he led the Jamestown colony and coordinated its commerce and natives. He quickly realized that Spanish tactics wouldn't work in North America, so they just abandoned the Spanish tricks. But the British corporation who was in charge of Jamestown settlement were dissatisfied with all this thing. They reorganized the colony's government, and which really angered John Smith. He left, and most of the Jamestown colonists starved to death the following winter. So this argument was based England started to realize that if it wanted to maintain control of its colony, it had to give the settlers land and also some basic human rights. So England had no other option but to give these people all these rights. So basically the crux here is the rights, how the England people tried the same tactics that the Spanish tried, but the Spanish were successful. But in the North America, these tactics were not successful, so England had to give some rights to the people. And in the end, you can see by the early 1700s, the male settlers in the 13 US colonies had far broader political rights than other nations in the world. So this is basically, this thing created the foundation for the US Declaration of Independence. So you can see how from a very small point the author synthesized a very wider argument. They just started by telling that how the Spanish settlers colonized the land and how England wanted to colonize the America in the same way, but the England tactics were not working in that colonies. So they just started giving people some rights, and these rights was so powerful for the people there that in the 1700s, in the 18th century, the settlers in the US 13 colonies, all the male settlers, not the females, they had far broader political rights than other nations in the world. So this is basically that is why these 13 US colonies rebelled against the England government at the end, and now you can see the great America in front of you, and it is basically the result of some rights. So in these three sections, if we conclude it, we can say that the author wants to tell us how just like human rights or the citizen rights can change the destiny of a nation. And then there is the last section of this book, of this chapter, which is a tale of two constitutions. In this section, the author argued that the history they have presented so far explain why the US went on to create a relatively egalitarian constitution, and it also explained why Mexico's constitution was not nearly as democratic. So that is why the Nogales, Arizona and Nogales, Sonora has so much difference, just because of their constitution. And these constitutions are based on the history. The history of US is different from the history of Mexico. Mexico was ruled by the Spanish settlers, and US was ruled by the England settlers who tried to give rights. And just the division of rights created so much difference between these two countries. And in Mexico's fight for independence, they say that Mexico's fight for independence started after Napoleon invaded Spain and dethroned its king in 1808. So that is why the Spanish military leaders passed a new constitution, and it was also based on the principles of equality and popular sovereignty. So basically this frightened the elite section of the Mexico, so they just rebelled against it, and that is why the constitution of Mexico couldn't be as effective as the US Constitution. The US Constitution didn't establish a modern democracy. It disenfranchised women and black people and protected slavery, but the US managed to legislate away all the conflicts between the North and South through the agreements like the 3/5 Compromise, etc. That is why US political institutions stayed intact until the Civil War. However, on the Mexico side, there has been stability for the first 15 years of its constitution. The authors have tried to present a theory of world inequality, and like they say that history profoundly shapes both political and economic institutions. They say that over time societies tend to get stuck in certain patterns of political and economic organization, and these patterns make overcoming global inequality very difficult. And they also say that powerful elites often resist change because the change would threaten their status, and since they have power, they can do so many things to block these changes. Therefore they say like it focuses on poverty and prosperity, and this book is really as much about politics as it is about economics, and it will cover the history and all the things that will shape the economic system of a country, and politics is very important in the economy of any country. So this is what they have said in chapter number 1, and we are successfully done with the summary of chapter number 1. So in the next videos you will find the summary of chapter number 2 and 3, like 2 chapters summary in each video. So stay tuned and do tell us how about your like reviews about this book, and did you like the summary, or do you want some changes or anything you want us to add in our summary. Thank you so much. Allah Hafiz.